I remember the sound of rain on Camino. Not real rain on, ano the kind that falls from clouds and nourishes earth high, but the processed, recycled water that hammered against the transparent steel windows of the cloning facility in endless sheets, day after day, year after year. It made a specific sound, a drumming that never quite achieved rhythm, never quite fell into silence. Even now, decades removed from that place, I can hear it in the spaces between my thoughts. It is the sound of being made. They told us we were born, but that is not accurate. We were grown, cultivated, assembled from genetic material like starship components, each piece tested and measured and approved before integration. I emerged from the gestation tank on a Tuesday, though I would not learn the concept of days of the week until much later, and by then it seemed a trivial thing, a civilian affectation that had no place in the life of a soldier. What mattered was the designation. DT 7-1867 7867, a number that would follow me through training, through deployment, through every battle and every moment of doubt that came after. The Kaminoans who raised USA, though raised is perhaps too gentle a word, moved through the facility like pale ghosts, their long necks swaying as they walked, their voices soft and clinical. They never touched us unnecessarily. Every interaction was purposeful, measured, documented. I remember the feeling of their instruments against my skin during the early examinations, cold and precise, and the way they would murmur to each other in their own language when they found something satisfactory in our development. We were products to them. Inventory, .shell. And we knew this, even as children. If we could be called children, because there was no deception on Camino, only efficiency. They accelerated our growth, doubled it, so that we aged twice as fast as the beings we were created to protect. This was explained to us as a feature, not a flaw. It meant the Republic would have soldiers when it needed them, trained and ready, without the decades of waiting that natural birth required. It meant we would reach our peak physical condition faster, perform our duties in the compressed time frame that war demanded, and cycle out before the genetic degradation became problematic. No one used the word disposable, but it hung in the air of every training room, every mess hall, every barracks. We were renewable resources, and resources, by definition, are meant to be spent. My batchmates and I learned to fight before we learned to read. We learned to strip and reassemble a DC-15A blaster rifle before we learned the names of the planets we would die defending. The training was constant, brutal, impersonal. The Kaminoans employed a cadre of instructors, mercenaries, bounty hunters, retired soldiers from a dozen conflicts to shape us into weapons. I remember one in particular, a Mandalorian woman with a scar that ran from her temple to her jaw, who would walk between our formations during live fire exercises and strike any trooper who hesitated. Not hard enough to injure, that would damage the producta, but hard enough to teach. Hesitation kills, she would say, her voice flat and matter-of-fact. Your brothers, your mission, yourself, in that order. We believed her. We had to. There was no framework for disbelief, no reference point for questioning. The galaxy beyond Camino was an abstraction, a collection of holographic briefings and tactical scenarios. The war we were being prepared for had not yet begun, but we trained for it with the certainty of religious devotees, because purpose had been written into our genes alongside the accelerated aging and the enhanced muscle density and the predisposition toward obedience. Obedience. Die. That word deserves its own moment of reflection, its own space in this accounting. We were engineered for it, they said. The Kaminoans had taken Jango Fett's genetic template on man legendary for his independence, his ruthlessness, his refusal to bow to any authority, and modified it. Smoothed out the rough edges, adjusted the neurochemical balance to make us more suggestible, more compliant, more willing to subsume our individual wills to the collective mission. They were proud of this achievement. They showed us the brain scans. The comparative studies, the statistical analyses that proved we were more effective than any volunteer army could ever be. And yet I remember lying in my bunk at night, listening to the breathing of 40 identical men in the barracks around me, and feeling something that the Kaminoans had not planned for. A sensation I did not have words for then, but which I have since learned to call loneliness. We were surrounded by Brothersa, genetic duplicates, men who shared our face and our voice and our training gear, and yet each of us was fundamentally alone inside our own skull, trapped with thoughts that were not supposed to exist. The war came to us before we went to it. I was 8 years old, 16 in appearance, fully grown and Tranda, when the call came down from Tepoka City. The Separatists had revealed themselves. The Clone Wars had begun, and we were needed. The transport from Camino to Coruscant took 3 days, and those days were the first time many of us had ever been off-world. I pressed my face to the viewport during the jump to hyperspace, and watched the stars stretch into lines, then vanish into the blue-white tunnel of faster-than-light travel. It was beautiful. No one had told us it would be beautiful. I'm sorry. Beauty was not part of the training curriculum. Coruscant itself was overwhelming. A planet-wide city, a monument to civilization and bureaucracy and power. We descended through atmospheric traffic that stretched in every direction, landing platforms and skylanes and transport tubes, carrying billions of beings about their daily lives. I had never seen a civilian before. Had never seen a child that was not a clone in training. Had never seen elderly beings or families, or the casual chaos of life lived without military discipline. Our first assignment was ceremonial, almost. A parade through the Senate District, a public display of the Republic's new Grand Army. Thousands of us marching in perfect formation, our white armor gleaming under the Coruscant sun, while crowds gathered on the walkways above to watch. Some cheered. Some were silent. I caught glimpses of their faces as we passed humans, Twi'leks, Rhodians, dozens of species I had only seen in training Holosa, and tried to understand what they were thinking. Were they grateful? Afraid? Did they see us as liberators? Or as something else? Something more disturbing? A woman threw flowers. They landed at my feet, bright yellow petals against the polished stone of the parade route, and I had to step over them without breaking stride. The gesture felt wrong somehow. Flowers were for the living, for celebrations and courtships and all the small rituals of normal life. We were soldiers. We were already marked for death. The flowers should have been saved for someone else. After the parade, we were billeted in a massive military complex on the lower levels of the Senate District. Real bunks, real armor racks, real mess halls that served food we had not tasted before. There was a kind of luxury to it, compared to Camino, but also a wrongness. The city hummed around us, a vast organism of life and noise and activity, and we were separate from it, cordoned off in our sterile barracks, waiting for orders. The Jedi came to inspect us. I had heard of the Jedi, of course. They featured prominently in our strategic training, identified as the commanders who would lead us into battle. Force users, peacekeepers, warrior monks with laser swords and supernatural abilities. The briefings had presented them as assets, tactical resources to be protected and obeyed. What the briefings had not prepared us for was their presence. The one who came to our battalion was a Zebrak named Varan Kellis. He was younger, not much older than we appeared, though of course his years were natural, and ours were compressed up, with the traditional facial tattoos of his species, and a lightsaber that hung from his belt like a question mark. He walked through the barracks slowly, meeting the eyes of each trooper he passed. And there was something in his gaze that made me uncomfortable. Not hostility. Not suspicion. Something closer to sorrow. You are not slaves, he said, addressing us from the center of the formation bay. His voice was quiet, but it carried. You are soldiers of the Republic. Free men, serving a cause greater than yourselves. I want you to understand that. To believe that. Because the moment you begin to think of yourselves as property, as things rather than people, you will lose what makes you most valuable. Your ability to think, to adapt, to fight with purpose rather than programming. Noon. Whoa. The speech was well-intentioned. I understood that even then, but it was also naive, or perhaps willfully blind. We were not free men. We had been created for a specific purpose, trained from our earliest moments to fulfill that purpose, and given no choice in the matter. The fact that we were called soldiers rather than slaves was a semantic distinction, a comfortable lie that the Republic told itself to justify what it had done. But I said nothing. We all said nothing, because that was what we had been made to do. Our first deployment was to Geonosis. The battle had already begun by the time our LAT gunship descended through the atmosphere, and the desert planet spread below us like a vision of hell. Dust storms, crashed starships, the scorched remnants of Separatist foundries and Republic landing zones, and everywhere, the flashes of blaster fire and the trails of missiles and the black smoke of burning machinery. 30 seconds, the pilot shouted over the comm, and I felt my stomach drop as the gunship banked hard to avoid anti-aircraft fire. Around me, my brothers checked their weapons, adjusted their helmets, prepared themselves for whatever was waiting on the ground. I did the same, going through the motions automatically, but part of my mind was somewhere else, watching from a distance, aware that this was the momentum, the first real momentum, when theory would become practice, when training would become killing. We hit the ground in the middle of a firefight. Battle droids, hundreds of them each, advancing across the open desert toward a Republic artillery position. Our orders were simple. Reinforce the position, hold the line, eliminate all hostile targets. The Jedi, General Kellis, was already on the ground ahead of us, his green lightsaber a blur as he deflected incoming fire and cut through the droid ranks. I remember the first time I pulled the trigger. The DC-15 kicked against my shoulder, a familiar sensation from thousands of hours on the training range, but the context was different. The target was not a holographic projection or a stationary cutout. It was a bone battle droid, thin and skeletal, advancing with its blaster raised, and when my shot hit its central processor, it collapsed mid-step, sparks flying from the wound. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no horror, no sense of accomplishment. Just a hollow confirmation that my training had worked. I had done what I was made to do. The battle lasted 4 hours. Or perhaps it lasted forever. Time became elastic, meaningless, measured only in the rhythm of reloading and firing and moving and firing again. My brothers fell around me. T-4429 took a direct hit to the chest and was dead before he hit the ground. CT-9921 lost his leg to a thermal detonator and bled out despite our medics' efforts. 6,000. Their numbers are carved into my memory, but their faces are all the same. My face, our face. The face of Jango Fett, replicated and replicated and replicated until individuality became a statistical anomaly. We held the position. Now and Mamei. The droids were destroyed. General Kellis survived without injury. The after-action report classified the engagement as a tactical success. No one mentioned the cost. That night, back on the transport ship, I sat in the cargo bay and cleaned my rifle. The barrel was hot, nearly too hot to touch, and the smell of ozone and melted tabanic gas clung to my armor. Around me, the other survivors did the same, working in silence, each man alone with his thoughts. The Kaminoans had not trained us for this part. The aftermath, the weight that settled over you after the adrenaline faded, and you had time to remember that the numbers in the casualty report were men you had eaten breakfast with, men who had shared your face and your blood and your strange compressed existence. CT-5, 391 Noel. Wei called him sixes. One of the small acts of rebellion that flourished in the spaces between official orders sat down next to me. He had removed his helmet, and his face was streaked with dirt and sweat. He looked exhausted. We all looked exhausted. "Did you see the general?" he asked. His voice was hoarse. "Kellis? Yeah, he was effective. That's one word for it." Sixes stared at his hands. "Did you see the way he moved? Like he knew where every shot was going before it was fired. Like the Force was just telling him, guiding him." That's what the briefing said. Enhanced reflexes, precognition, all part of their connection to the Force. Yeah. Sixes was quiet for a moment. You ever wonder what that feels like? To have something guiding you? To know, really know, what you're supposed to do? The question hung between us. I wanted to say that we had something similar, that our training and our genetic conditioning gave us a kind of certainty, a purpose that was written into ourselves. But even as I formed the thought, I knew it was not the same. The Jedi chose their path. We had ours chosen for us. No, I lied. I don't wonder about that. Sixes nodded slowly, as if he understood that I was lying, but did not want to press the issue. He put his helmet back on, transforming from a tired man into an anonymous soldier, and walked away. I did not sleep that night. Wow. I lay in my bunk and listened to the hum of the ship's engines, a sound that would become as familiar to me as the rain on Camino, and I thought about the droids, about how easy it had been to destroy them. How simple the moral calculus was when your enemy was a machine, a thing without consciousness or fear or the capacity to suffer. We had been created to fight in a war where the enemy was, by definition, less alive than we were. And I wondered, not for the last time, if that was by design. If the architects of this war had chosen mechanical soldiers for the Separatists precisely because it made the killing easier for us, made us easier to use. Geonosis was the first battle, but not the last. Not even close. Over the months that followed, our battalion was deployed to a dozen worlds. Christophsis. Ryloth. Camino itself, when the Separatists attempted to strike at the cloning facilities. Each campaign blurred into the next, a continuous stream of pre-dawn briefings and orbital insertions and firefights in terrain that ranged from frozen tundra to jungle hell. We learned the rhythm of war, the way it compressed time and expanded it simultaneously, so that an hour of combat felt like a lifetime, and a week in garrison passed in a blink. We also learned the cost. After every battle, the casualty reports. After every campaign, the replacements of fresh troopers shipped in from Camino with our same face and our same training, but without the weight we carried. They were eager, sometimes enthusiastic. They had not yet learned that enthusiasm was just another word for innocence, and that innocence did not survive contact with the enemy. I was promoted to sergeant after Christophsis, not because I had done anything exceptional, but because my original squad leader had died and someone needed to fill the role. The promotion came with a small increase in responsibility and a paint stripe on my Helmeta Battalion Blua, but no additional pay. Clones did not receive pay. We received equipment, rations, medical care, and purpose. That was supposed to be enough. General Kellis treated us well by most standards. He learned our names, not our designations, but the nicknames we gave ourselves. He asked our opinions during tactical planning sessions. He risked his own life to pull wounded troopers from the battlefield, more than once, when a more cautious commander would have written them off as acceptable losses. And yet, there was always a distance between us, a gap that could not be bridged, because at the end of the day, he was free to walk away from the war if he chose, and we were not. I saw him die on Umbara. We had been fighting for 3 days in the perpetual twilight of that poisoned world, advancing through bioluminescent forests, where every shadow concealed a threat. The Umbaran militia were not droids. They were living beings, defending their world with a savage desperation that made every engagement brutal and personal. Our casualties were mounting. The supply lines were stretched thin. And General Kellis was pushing us hard, harder than he ever had before, as if he could sense that something was wrong with the entire campaign, but could not put it into words. It was an Umbaran sniper that killed him. We were crossing an open ridge, moving toward a militia strongpoint, when the shot came. It hit him in the chest, piercing the robes and the flesh beneath, and he fell without a sound. I was 10 meters away. Close enough to see the surprise on his face, the way his hand went to his lightsaber as if he could deflect the bolt retroactively, the moment when he understood that he had miscalculated, and that death had found him anyway. We called for a medical transport. No. We stabilized him as best we could, but the shot had severed something vital, and by the time the medevac arrived, he was gone. Just like that. A Jedi, being who could move objects with his mind and sense danger, before it arrived dead, from a single well-placed shot by a frightened militiaman defending his home. The new commander arrived within hours. General Pong Krell Daitzli Ad Gut, a basilisk Jedi with 4 arms and a reputation for aggressive tactics. He assembled the battalion in the makeshift command center, still stained with Kellis's blood, and addressed us without preamble. "I am not interested in coddling you," he said, his voice like gravel. "You are soldiers, tools of war, and under my command you will be used accordingly." General Kellis was too soft, too concerned with preserving your lives at the expense of victory. That ends now. We will take this planet, no matter the cost. Because that is what soldiers do. Something in the air changed when he said that. A tightening, a darkening. The troopers around me stood at attention, silent and disciplined, but I could feel the shift in their posture, the way their shoulders tensed. We had been called many things, clones, troopers, brothers, but never tools. Not to our faces. Not by someone who was supposed to lead us. Krell's tactics were brutal. He sent us on frontal assaults against fortified positions. He refused to call for reinforcements even when we were outnumbered. How? He ordered us to advance through minefields because, in his words, casualties are acceptable if they create openings for the mission. Within 2 days under his command, our battalion had lost more men than we had in the previous month. And then came the night on the airbase. We had captured an Umbaran military facility, a sprawling complex of hangars and runways and defensive towers. Our orders were to hold the position until Republic forces could reinforce us. But Krell told us that hostile forces were approaching from the east, disguised in Republic armor, attempting to infiltrate and sabotage our position. He ordered us to engage on sight. To show no mercy. I was leading my squad through the eastern perimeter when we saw them. Figures in white armor, moving through the fog, carrying Republic weapons. They matched the description Krell had given us perfectly. Traitors. Infiltrators. Threats. Engage, I ordered, and my men opened fire. The figures returned fire immediately, and the fog lit up with blaster bolts, red and blue crossing in the darkness. It was chaos. Confusion. We were taking casualties, and so were they, and I was shouting coordinates and trying to maintain formation when I heard Ita's voice over the comm, speaking in a frequency that only clones used. "Ceasefire! Ceasefire! We're a Republic! We're 501st. The words did not make sense. Could not make sense. The 501st was a different battalion, deployed to a different sector. They were not supposed to be here. And yet, the voice on the comm was identical to mine, identical to every clone in the Grand Army, because it was the voice of our shared template, and it was screaming at us to stop shooting. I called the ceasefire. Too late. Far too late. And when the fog cleared and we approached the bodies, I saw the armor. White, with blue markings. Republic issue. Clone armor. The men we had been fighting were not Umbarans in disguise. They were our brothers. Troopers from the 501st deployed to reinforce our position, exactly as we had been, and told the exact same Liatai that hostiles in Republic armor were approaching from their west. Krell had sent us to kill each other. I do not remember falling to my knees. I do not remember removing my helmet or vomiting into the dirt. I remember only the bodies, dozens of them, men with our face and our armor and our purpose, dead because they had followed orders. Because we had followed orders. Because that was what we had been made to do. The designation of the first trooper I confirmed dead was CT 5597. Jesse, his brothers called him. He had taken 3 shots to the chest, and his helmet was cracked, and when I turned him over, his eyes were still open, staring at nothing. I closed them. It seemed important to close them, though I did not know why. We did not have funerals. Maybe, my children. We did not have rituals for the dead. We were soldiers, and soldiers were replaced, and the war continued regardless. But I closed his eyes anyway. The others were gathering now, the survivors from both battalions, and the realization was spreading through them like poison. We had been used, manipulated, sent to murder our own brothers because a Jedi, being we were conditioned to trust and obey, had decided we were expendable. CT 5555 called Fives, one of the 501st survivors, found me in the aftermath. His armor was scorched, his voice shaking with fury. Where is he? Fives demanded. Where is Krell? The command center. Dogoler. Kubu. Lycio to disheard. Bagdwal Noraglad. But you can't Can't what? Can't confront him? Can't demand answers? Fives grabbed my shoulder, his grip tight enough to hurt. He sent us to kill each other. He murdered our brothers. And you want me to stand down? I did not know what I wanted. Part of me, the part that had been engineered and trained and conditioned, said that we should report through proper channels, that we should trust the system, that the Jedi Council would investigate and justice would be served. But another part of me, smaller and quieter and more dangerous, said that the system had created this situation in the first place, that we were products and tools and resources, and that Krell had simply used us the way we were meant to be used. I'll come with you, I heard myself say. We marched to the command center, 24 of us, troopers from both battalions united by our grief and our rage. Krell was waiting. He did not try to deny what he had done, did not offer excuses or apologies. He simply smiled, his forearms folded across his chest, and told us the truth. I have foreseen the fall of the Republic, he said. The Jedi will be destroyed, the Sith will rise, and I will not fall with a dying order. I have chosen the winning side, and you clones, are nothing but a means to an end. You were bred to die. I am simply expediting the process. He had betrayed the Republic, betrayed the Jedi, betrayed us, and he expected us to simply accept it, to continue following his orders, because that was what we had been made to do. Fives shot him. The bolt hit Krell in the shoulder, spinning him around, and then we were all firing, a storm of blaster fire that lit up the command center. But Krell was a Jedi, even a fallen one, and he was fast. He drew his 2 double-bladed lightsabers, rare and terrible sight, and deflected our shots back at us. Men fell. The room filled with smoke and screaming, and the hum of spinning plasma blades. It took 20 minutes to bring him down. We lost 8 more brothers in the process. And when it was finally over, when Krell lay wounded and disarmed on the floor of the command center, we faced a choice. Execute him, or take him prisoner. The regulations were clear. Prisoners were to be secured and transferred to Republic Command for trial. But the regulations had also told us to follow Krell's orders, to trust the Jedi, to serve without question. And where had that led us? To fratricide, to bodies in the fog. To the knowledge that we were expendable in ways we had not fully understood until that moment. Do it, Krell said, looking up at us with something like contempt. Prove that you are more than your programming. Show me that you can think for yourselves. It was a challenge, a dare, and perhaps in his twisted way, a test. CT-6922A, Dogma, the most loyal trooper I had ever known, the one who had defended Krell longer than any wanna, stepped forward. His hands were shaking. His voice was barely a whisper. I'm sorry, Dogma said. To whom? I did not know. Krell? You. Himself. Our dead brothers. Me? All of us. He fired once. The bolt hit Krell between the eyes and the basilisk slumped forward, dead. We reported it as killed in combat. The official record states that General Pong Krell was eliminated while resisting arrest after his betrayal was discovered. No mention of the execution. No mention of Dogma's choice. The Republic needed heroes, not moral complications. Dogma was arrested anyway, court-martialed for killing a superior officer. They sent him to a military prison on Coruscant, and I never saw him again. The last I heard, he had been transferred to a maximum security facility and classified as a behavioral deviant, a warning to other clones about the dangers of thinking too much. The rest of us returned to the war. But something had broken on Umbara, some illusion that we had carried with us from Camino, some belief that we were fighting for something more than mere survival. We had seen the truth. We were tools, weapons, genetic property of the Republic, to be used and discarded as the situation required. And if a Jedi could betray Usa, could murder us for his own purpose, then what did our service mean? What was the point of our obedience? These were dangerous thoughts. Thoughts that the Kaminoans had tried to breed out of us, that our training had tried to suppress. But they grew anyway, like weeds in the cracks of a Duracrete foundation, small and stubborn, and impossible to kill. I was transferred to a new battalion after Umbara, CT-7 1867, Sergeant, 327th Star Corps, Dautai. We were assigned to General Ayla Secura, a Twi'lek Jedi with a reputation for compassion and tactical brilliance. She was everything Krell had not been, kind, thoughtful, genuinely concerned for our welfare. She learned our names. She asked about our thoughts, our fears. She treated us like people. And yet, I could not shake the feeling that it did not matter. That her kindness was just another form of management, a way of keeping us compliant and effective, because at the end of the day she was free, and we were not. She could leave the war if she chose. We could not. We were property. And property does not get to choose its purpose. The war continued. Months became years. Battles became campaigns, became endless, grinding attrition. We fought on ice worlds, and lava worlds, and worlds whose names I cannot remember, because they all blurred together into a single experience of violence and loss. My armor was repainted 12 times. My rifle was replaced when the barrel wore out. My brothers died and were replaced by fresh troopers from Camino, over and over, until I could no longer remember which faces I had known since training, and which had joined us a week ago. There was a day, I think it was on Selakami, though I cannot be certain, when I realized that I was one of the oldest troopers in the battalion. Not in years, because I was only 4 years old in absolute terms, but in experience. Most clones did not survive more than a year of active combat. The casualty rates were too high, the deployments too constant. But I had made it through Geonosis and Christophsis and Ryloth and Umbara and a dozen other hells, and I was still alive, still fighting, still following orders. I did not know if that made me lucky or cursed. General Secura trusted me. She gave me more autonomy than most sergeants received, allowed me to make tactical decisions in the field, consulted with me on strategy. It should have felt like respect, like acknowledgement of my competence and experience. But instead, it felt like burden, because every decision I made, every order I gave, resulted in the deaths of men who trusted me the way I had once trusted General Kellis. There was a private on Felucia CT-934 called Sketch, because he drew pictures in the dirt during downtime, who asked me a question during a lull in the fighting. We were dug in on the edge of a fungal forest, waiting for dawn, and he was young, very young, fresh from Camino, and still carrying the eagerness that would be beaten out of him soon enough. "Sarge," he said, "do you think we're winning?" The question caught me off guard. Not because it was difficult to answer, the tactical situation was clear. The Republic was holding its own against the Separatists, neither side gaining decisive advantage, but because it revealed an assumption that I had stopped making long ago. The assumption that winning was the point. Winning what? I asked. Sketch blinked. "The war. Do you think we're winning the war?" "We're surviving," I said. "That's all we can control." He nodded slowly, as if this was wise advice, and turned back to his watch. But I'd see that I had disappointed him. He had wanted certainty, reassurance, some confirmation that our sacrifices were leading somewhere meaningful, and I had given him nothing, because I had nothing to give. That night, Sketch was killed by a sniper. He died instantly, a single shot through the visor, and we left his body where it fell because we were advancing and could not spare the time to recover remains. His picture, scratched into the dirt of a dozen battlefields, were washed away by the next rain, and the war continued. There were rumors toward the end, whispers that passed between troopers during downtime, during the brief moments when we were not fighting or preparing to fight or recovering from fighting. Rumors about the Jedi, about the Chancellor, about secret orders and contingency plans and purposes that we had not been told about. I heard the phrase Order 66 for the first time from CT 4567, called Thorn, during a resupply stop on Coruscant. We were in a lower-level cantina, one of the few establishments that served clones, drinking the watered-down ale that the Republic provided in lieu of actual rest. And Thorn leaned close and said it like a secret. "You ever hear about Order 66? "No," I said. "What is it?" "Contingency order. In case the Jedi betray the Republic, we're supposed to neutralize them." The word hung between us. Neutralize. A clinical term? Yaun? A euphemism. We both knew what it meant. "Where did you hear this?" I asked. Thorn shrugged. "It's in the conditioning, buried deep. But some of the medics have been talking about it. They say we all have it, hardwired into our brains. A switch that can be flipped." "That's insane." "Is it? Now?" Thorn met my eyes. "After Umbara? After Krell? Is it really that insane to think the Republic would have a backup plan in case the Jedi go rogue?" I wanted to argue. Wanted to say that the Jedi were our commanders, our leaders, our protectors. But I had seen Krell, had seen what a Jedi could do when they decided we were expendable. And if one could betray us, why not others? "Even if it exists," I said carefully, "it would never be used. The Jedi are loyal to the Republic." "Maybe," Thorn said. "Or maybe loyalty is just another word for control." "Jian?" We finished our drinks in silence, and I tried to forget the conversation. Tried to focus on the mission, the next deployment, the day-to-day reality of survival. But the words lingered. A switch that can be flipped. hardwired into our brains. And I found myself wondering, late at night, whether my thoughts were truly my own or just another form of programming, more sophisticated than a droid's but fundamentally the same. The end came on for Lucia. We were on patrol, a routine sweep of the fungal forests, when I felt it, a presence in my mind, sudden and overwhelming, like a voice speaking directly into my skull. It was not words, exactly. More like a command, a directive, a certainty that crystallized instantly into purpose. The Jedi betrayed the Republic. Execute Order 66. I stopped walking. My brothers around me stopped as well. All of us frozen in perfect synchronization. All of us hearing the same voice, receiving the same order. And then we turned, as one, toward General Secura. She was ahead of us, walking point, her lightsaber clipped to her belt. She must have sensed something, the Force, warning Hera because she started to turn, her hand moving toward her weapon. But she was too slow. We were too fast. And we had been created for this. I raised my rifle. So did the troopers beside me. 20 weapons, all aimed at a woman who had trusted us, who had fought beside us, who had treated us like people rather than products. Wait, Aunt? She began. We fired. The bolts hit her from every angle, a synchronized execution, and she fell without finishing the sentence. Her body collapsed into the fungal undergrowth, lightsaber unignited, and we stood over her for a moment, confirming the kill before moving on to our next objective. I remember feeling nothing. No guilt, no horror, no doubt. The order had been given, and we had obeyed, because that was what we had been made to do. The conditioning, the genetic modifications, the neurochemical adjustments, the training that began before we could walk, had all been leading to this moment. A switch that could be flipped. And it had been flipped. We returned to base and reported the successful elimination of the Jedi traitor. No one questioned it. No one asked for details. You? The order had gone out across the entire galaxy, simultaneously, and every clone unit was executing it with the same ruthless efficiency. The Jedi were being hunted down, systematically, by the very soldiers they had led for 3 years. It should have felt wrong, should have triggered some response, some hesitation, some memory of everything we had shared with them. But the conditioning was absolute. In that moment, I could not conceive of disobedience, could not imagine refusing. The Jedi were traitors. We were loyal. The equation was simple. It was only letter A. Hours later, after the adrenaline faded and the certainty began to crack, that I started to feel it. Not guilt. Not yet. Just confusion. A sense of discontinuity, as if I had been somewhere else for a brief time, and only now was returning to myself. I found myself standing in the barracks, still in my armor, holding my rifle, trying to remember exactly what had happened. The images were there, raising the weapon, firing, watching General Secura fall, but they felt distant, as if they belonged to someone else, or as if I had been someone else when they happened. CT 4429 Aeon. No, it was wrong. He had died on Geonosis. CT 138, called Bakura, my commanding officer, found me there. His armor was splattered with blood, and his helmet was off, and his face was expressionless. You feel it too? He asked. Feel what? He paused, searching for words. The clearing, like fog lifting. I nodded slowly. What was that? That order? That voice? Inhibitor chip, Bakura said. Organic implant in our brains. The Kaminoans put it there during development. It's keyed to specific commands, and Order 66 was one of them. When it activated, it overrode everything else. Made us compliant. You sound like you knew about it. Some of us did. The ARC troopers, the commanders, we were briefed years ago in case the chips malfunctioned. But we were told it was just a behavioral safeguard to prevent us from going rogue. He laughed, bitter and short. Turns out it was the opposite. It was to make sure we would go rogue when ordered to. No. I sat down heavily on my bunk. Around us, other troopers were moving through the barracks, cleaning weapons, stripping armor, going through the motions of routine as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. We had killed our commanders, our leaders, people who had fought beside us, bled beside us, trusted us. And we had done it without question, without hesitation, because something in our brains had taken control and made us into executioners. Is it over? I asked. The effect? Are we ourselves again? The Kara shrugged. I don't know. I don't know if we were ever ourselves. Maybe this is what we always were. And the rest was just... He trailed off, staring at his hands. They were shaking slightly. The Jedi are gone. The war is over. The Republic is reorganizing into something called the Galactic Empire, and we're being rebranded as stormtroopers, Imperial soldiers. Just like that? Just like that. The transition was swift and absolute. Within days, the clone armor was being repainted, white with black joints, the battalion markings removed. Within weeks, we were receiving new designations, new chains of command, new operational parameters. The Jedi were declared traitors who had attempted to overthrow the Republic. The Clone Wars were reframed as a separatist rebellion that had been crushed. And we, the Grand Army of the Republic, became the enforcement arm of a new galactic order. Emperor Palpatine? That was his title now, not Chancellor. Emperor Dogby Timason. The Senate still existed, technically, but it was a shell, a performance. Real power flowed from Coruscant through a network of imperial governors and military commanders, and we were the instrument of that power. The first missions under the Empire were not against separatists. They were against dissidents, protesters, entire planetary populations that refused to acknowledge imperial authority. We were sent to enforce compliance, to crush resistance, to make examples of those who questioned the new order. It was different from the Clone Wars. The enemy was not droids. They were people, civilians, and they died the same way soldiers did, screaming, bleeding, begging for mercy that did not come, because we were following orders. Because that was what we had been made to do. I remember a city on Ryloth. We had fought there during the war, liberating it from separatist occupation, and the Twi'lek population had welcomed us as heroes. Now we were back, 3 years later, putting down an uprising against imperial rule. The population had organized protests, refusing to meet the Empire's quotas for mineral extraction. Our orders were to restore order by any means necessary. We fired into crowds, not with precision shots, not targeting specific threats, just volleys of blaster fire into masses of unarmed people, men and women and children, cutting them down like grain. And when the survivors scattered, we pursued them through the streets, into their homes, rooting out the organizers and executing them publicly as warnings to others. I killed a woman that day. She was young, maybe 20, and she was running, carrying a small child, trying to reach the safety of an alley. I shot her in the back. She fell, and the child tumbled from her arms, crying, and I stepped over both of them and kept moving, because we were advancing and could not stop for individual casualties. That night, I sat in the troop transport and tried to reconcile what we had done with what we had been told we were. Soldiers, wives, peacekeepers, protectors of the Republic. But the Republic was gone, and we were not peacekeepers. We were not protectors. We were enforcers. Tools of oppression. And the worst part, the part that made it almost unbearable, was that I could not stop, could not refuse, could not even fully articulate why it was wrong, because the conditioning that had made me kill General Sekura was still there, still active, still whispering that obedience was purpose, and purpose was all that mattered. Some clones adapted better than others. I saw it in the barracks, the way certain troopers embraced their new role. They liked the power, the fear they inspired, the simplicity of serving an empire that did not pretend to value them as anything other than weapons. For them, the removal of the Jedi, the commanders who had treated us like Pipala, was a relief. Now there was no ambiguity, no expectation that we should be more than what we were made to be. Others struggled. I heard rumors of clones who refused orders, who tried to desert, who spoke out against the atrocities we were committing. They disappeared. Quietly. Officially listed as casualties or transfers or behavioral deviants, requiring reconditioning. But we knew what happened to them. The Empire did not tolerate disobedience, even from its own soldiers. Especially from its own soldiers. I thought about deserting. Late at night, during the quiet hours between deployments, I would imagine it. Walking away, finding a transport to some outer rim world where the Empire's reach was weak, disappearing into a population of billions, becoming just another being trying to survive. But the thought never progressed beyond imagination. Because where would I go? What would I do? I had been created for war. Chisalagdauter, that's her name. Shikaudes, trained for nothing else. Wide, too. I had no skills, no identity, no purpose outside the military. I was 28 years old in appearance, but only 7 in actual age, aging twice as fast as the beings I was sent to oppress, and I would be dead of old age before I turned 20. The accelerated aging felt different now. During the war, it had seemed like a feature way to produce soldiers quickly, efficiently. But under the Empire, it felt like planned obsolescence. We were being used up, burned through, discarded as our bodies failed decades before they should have. And there were no new clones being produced. The Kaminoans had been shut down, their facilities seized by the Empire, their cloning contracts terminated. We were the last generation, a finite resource, dwindling with every deployment, every battle, every year that stripped 2 years from our lives. I was not alone in noticing this. The older troopers saw, those of us who had survived since Geonosis, who carried the accumulated weight of 1,000 battles saw, we could feel it. The exhaustion, the physical degradation. The way injuries took longer to heal, the way our reflexes slowed, the way our bodies betrayed us in small increments. We were aging out. On your Mars, becoming obsolete. No. And the Empire was already training replacements, regular humans, recruited or conscripted from across the galaxy, who would take our place when we finally broke down. CT-138, Bakara, died on Kashyyyk.or. We were putting down a Wookiee insurgency, because the Wookiees had refused to submit to Imperial slavery, had fought back when stormtroopers came to round up workers for the construction projects that were consuming entire Sector Sad. The forest fighting was brutal. Wookiees were strong, intelligent, and intimately familiar with their terrain. They struck from the trees, from hidden platforms, using bowcasters and improvised explosives and sheer physical power to tear through our formations. Makara took a bowcaster bolt to the chest. The weapon fired a magnetic accelerated coral that punched through his armor like it was paper, and he was dead before the medic reached him. I was there when it happened. I saw the surprise on his face, the same expression I had seen on General Kellis years before, the moment of realizing that this was it. That all the battles, and all the training, and all the purpose amounted to this. Dying in a forest, far from home, for reasons that no longer made sense. We left his body on Kashyyyk. No funeral, no memorial. Just another casualty report, Another number in the Imperial database. Another clone returned to the atoms from which he had been assembled. After Kashyyyk, I requested a transfer. Not a discharge, that was impossible, but a reassignment to a garrison position, somewhere quieter, where the fighting was less constant. I told my commanding officer that I was experiencing fatigue, that my combat effectiveness was declining, that I needed time to recover. All true, but not the whole truth. The whole truth was that I could not keep killing, could not keep following orders that led to atrocities, could not keep pretending that this was what I had been made for. The request was denied. You're 77,867, the officer said, not looking up from his datapad. One of the originals. Survived the Clone Wars. Your experience is valuable. The Empire needs soldiers like you on the front lines, not wasting away in some garrison posting. I am asking for relief, sir, not retirement. And I'm denying it. Dismissed. So I went back to the transports and the deployments and the missions that all blurred together into a single experience of violence, without purpose. We pacified planets whose names I forgot before we left orbit. We killed insurgents who were fighting for the same freedoms the Republic had supposedly represented. We enforced laws designed to strip entire populations of autonomy, wealth, and dignity. And I obeyed. Because I had been made to obey. Because the inhibitor chip in my brain, even when not actively controlling me, had shaped my personality, my reflexes, my capacity for independent thought. I was a clone. A tool. Non-moi. And tools do not choose their purpose. It was on Lothal that I met him. A deserter. Another clone, older than May, on of the first generation, produced at the very beginning of the war, living under an assumed identity in a settlement on the planet's frontier. I had been sent to investigate reports of Imperial equipment going missing from a supply depot, and the trail led to this man, this clone, who had somehow managed to walk away from the Empire and build something resembling a life. His name had been CT-822. Now he called himself Rex. Or at least, that's what he told me when I found him in his small dwelling, surrounded by scavenged machinery and makeshift tools, living alone in self-imposed exile. You here to arrest me? He asked. His face was older than mine, deeply lined, gray at the temples. We shared the same basic feature saw, Jango Fett's feature saw, but time had marked him differently. I'm here to investigate theft. Yeah, I'm stealing from the Empire, power cells mostly, communication equipment, selling it to settlers who can't afford official channels. He leaned back against his workbench, arms crossed. You going to shoot me for that? No. I should have. My orders were clear. Desertion, theft of Imperial property, aiding civilians in violation of trade regulations, all capital offenses. But I stood there, rifle lowered, looking at this man who had somehow done what I could not even imagine, and I asked the only question that mattered. How? Rex smiled, sad and knowing. The chip. I had it removed. Years ago, right after Order 66. There was a medic, a clone like us, who figured out what it was doing. He pulled it out of me and 2 others before the Empire found him. What happened to him? Executed. But not before he saved us. Not before he gave us a choice. Rex moved to a small cooling unit and pulled out 2 bottles of something that looked like beer. He offered one to me. You feel it, don't you? The weight, the knowledge that you're not really in control. I took the bottle, but did not drink. If I felt that, I wouldn't be here. I'd be dead or in prison. You're here because you're looking for a reason, not to arrest me. Because some part of you, the part the Kaminoans couldn't quite breed out on, knows that what you're doing is wrong. Now, I'm following orders. Yeah, we all are. That's the problem. Rex drank from his bottle, watching me carefully. You know what the Empire is, right? You've seen what we're doing. Oppression, slavery, genocide on some worlds. We're the bad guys now, brother. We're the droids. The comparison hit harder than it should have. The droids. Mindless, obedient, following their programming without question or conscience. Was that what we were? Had we always been that? The Jedi betrayed the Republic, I said, repeating the official line. But the words felt hollow even as I spoke them. Did they? Or is that just what we were told to believe? Rex set down his bottle. I was there. On Coruscant. I saw what happened. Nishti, now there more. Odo, it shall we off him. The Jedi tried to arrest Palpatine because he was a Sith Lord. They were right. He played both sides of the war, manipulated everything, created us specifically to destroy them. We were weapons aimed at the Jedi from the moment we were conceived. Ah, Naomi, that's treason. It's the truth. And you know it's the truth, because you wouldn't still be standing here if you believed the Empire's propaganda. We stood in silence for a long moment. Outside, I could hear the sounds of the settlementa, speeder bikes, voices, the ordinary noise of life continuing. Rex had built something here. Not much, but something. A small autonomy in a galaxy that was rapidly closing such spaces. I can't let you go, I finally said. Rex nodded. Me. I know. The chip. Even removed, the conditioning runs deep. You'll follow your orders because it's all you know how to do. Then why tell me any of this? Because maybe someday you'll remember this conversation. Maybe someday you'll find someone who can remove that chip, and you'll have a choice. And when that day comes, you'll need to know that there's another option. That you don't have to be what they made you. I arrested him, filed the report, watched as Imperial security took him away to a detention facility where he would be processed, interrogated, and eventually executed for desertion and theft. I followed my orders precisely, efficiently, exactly as I had been trained to do. But I remembered the conversation. Every word. And it festered in my mind like an infection, spreading through my thoughts, corrupting the certainties I had relied on to function. The Empire was not the Republic. The war we were fighting now was not the Clone Wars. And we were not soldiers defending freedom. We were enforcers maintaining oppression. Rex had been right. We were the bad guys. We had always been the bad guys, or at least, we had been pointed at whoever the Republica and now the Empire designated as bad. We were weapons without conscience, tools without agency, and the only thing that separated us from battle droids was our capacity to suffer. I started to see them everywhere after that. The gaps. The inconsistencies. The moments when official Imperial propaganda contradicted observable reality. We were told we were bringing order and stability to the galaxy, but the planets we occupied were less stable, more violent, more impoverished than before. We were told we were protecting citizens from criminals and terrorists, but the people we killed were farmers and factory workers and families who simply wanted to be left alone. And we were told we were valued, that our service mattered, that the Empire appreciated our sacrifice. But new stormtroopers were arriving in every garrison. Human recruits, younger and more easily controlled, and the old clones were being quietly phased out, assigned to more dangerous missions, given less support, allowed to die off naturally through attrition and accelerated aging. I was 12 years old, day 24 in appearance, when I realized I was dying. Not from injury or disease, but from the accelerated aging itself. My joints ached constantly. I know. My reflexes were slower. Down at your name sounding down. My eyesight was deteriorating. The medics told me it was normal, expected, part of the design. Clones were not meant to live long lives. We were meant to serve our purpose and fade away. making room for the next generation of soldiers? How long? I asked the medic, a human who had replaced the clone medical staff months earlier. Hard to say. Your genetic markers indicate you'll be combat ineffective within 2 to 3 years. After that, he shrugged. Depends on how much they want to queue around. And if they don't? Decommissioning. It's humane. Painless. You'll be retired with honor. Retired. Another euphemism? An euphemism. I had heard the rumors. Clones who were decommissioned did not go to retirement facilities or veterans colonies. They simply disappeared, their designations removed from the registry, their equipment redistributed. The Empire did not waste resources on obsolete soldiers. That night, I made my decision. I was going to desert. Not immediately. It was not brave enough or stupid enough to just walk away. But I started to plan. Carefully, methodically, the way I had been trained to plan missions. I studied garrison routines, identified supply transports with weak security, researched outer rim worlds where a man could disappear. I saved ration credits. I stole small amounts of equipment, a civilian-grade comm unit, a few power cells, a medkit without Imperial markings, and I waited. The opportunity came on Ord Mantell. We had been sent to reinforce an Imperial facility that was dealing with increased pirate activity in the region. It was a routine deployment, low risk, which meant security was relatively lax. On our third night there, during a shift change, I slipped out of the barracks in civilian clothes I had acquired over months of careful planning. I walked out. Just walked. Out of the facility, into the city, toward the spaceport, where a dozen transports departed every hour for destinations across the galaxy. No one stopped me. No one questioned why a man who looked like a slightly older clone trooper was wandering the streets alone. In the chaos of Imperial-occupied Ord Mantell, I was invisible. I bought passage on a transport to Tatooine, used a false name, paid in untraceable credits. The captain did not ask questions. By dawn, I was off-world, sitting in the cargo hold of a smuggler's ship, watching Ord Mantell shrink behind us as we jumped to hyperspace. I had done it. I had deserted. I had walked away from the Empire, from my purpose, from everything I had been made to be, and I felt nothing. No relief, no joy, no sense of freedom, just a hollow emptiness, because I had severed the only connection to purpose I had ever known, and now I was adrift in a galaxy that had no use for broken soldiers. Tatooine was hell, a desert planet on the Outer Rim, ruled by criminal syndicates and home to the kind of people who asked no questions because they did not want their own questions asked. I found work in Mos Eisley, doing security for a cantina owner who paid in credits and shelter and did not care about my past. The job was simple. Stand near the door, look intimidating, break up fights before they damage the property. It was nothing like being a soldier. It was petty and small and meaningless, and yet, for the first time since Camino, I was making my own choices, deciding when to intervene and when to let things play out, choosing which patrons to tolerate and which to eject, living, in some small way, as a person rather than a tool. The accelerated aging continued. By my 15th year, 30, in appearance, I was old. My hair was gray. My hands trembled. The aches in my joints had become constant pain, and there were mornings when I could barely stand. The cantina owner kept me on out of pity more than need, and I knew it was only a matter of time before even that small mercy ended. I thought about Rex sometimes, about the choice he had talked about, the option to remove the inhibitor chip and become truly free. But I had waited too long. Even if I could find someone with the skill to perform the surgery, which I could not on Tatooine, what would it change? The chip was not making me obey anymore. I was free. And freedom, I had discovered, was just another word for purposeless. There was a night, near the end, when a young man came into the cantina. He could not have been more than 20, human, with the kind of idealistic fire that I remembered from fresh clones arriving on the battlefield. He was looking for passage off-world, he said. He was joining the rebellion. In? Rebellion? Against what? I asked, out of habit more than interest. The Empire. What else? He looked at me like I was stupid. You've been here too long, old man. There's a war happening out there, people fighting back. Maybe we can actually win this time. A war. Another war. Because the last one had worked out so well. Good luck, I said, and meant it. He left. I stayed. And I wondered, briefly, what it would have been like to be him. To be young and free and convinced that fighting could change things. But I was not young. I was not free. Not really. And I knew, with the certainty of experience, that wars did not change things. They just killed people and created new reasons for the next war. I died on Tatooine. Not in battle, not in service to any cause, but in my small room above the cantina, alone, my body finally giving out after 3 decades of accelerated use. There was no funeral, no memorial. The cantina owner sold my few possessions to cover the cost of disposal, and that was that. T7, 1867. Sergeant. 327th Star Corps, later redesignated as Imperial Stormtrooper, later deserter and exile. A number in a database, a statistic in a war that never really ended, a man who was made to obey and who broke that programming too late to matter. But before the end, in those final moments, lying in the darkness, listening to the sounds of the cantina below Ani, understood something that I had been too conditioned to see during my years of service. We had been the weapon, yes. The tool, down, Kashun, the instrument of oppression. But we had also been the victims. The first victims. Created without consent, trained without choice, used without mercy, and discarded without acknowledgement. The Kaminoans had grown us. The Republic had deployed us. The Jedi had commanded us. The Empire had exploited us. And through it all, we had suffered and died and disappeared. Generation after generation of identical men who never got to be anything more than what others decided we should be. General Sakura Mui. I think of her often, in these final moments. The way she looked back at us on Felucia, the moment before we fired. The trust in her eyes. The betrayal? I wonder if she understood in that last second what we were. Not monsters, not murderers by choice. Just slaves with guns, following programming we could not resist. I wonder if that makes it better or worse. The rain on Camino. That is what I hear now, as the darkness closes in. That endless processed rain, hammering against transparent steel, the sound of being made, of being grown for a purpose, of existing only to serve. And I think, what a terrible thing to be born knowing you will never be free. What a terrible thing to question your orders and then to follow them anyway. What a terrible thing to be cursed to think. The sound of rain fades. The darkness is complete. Oh. And CT 7867, who was never given a real name, who was never allowed to choose his fate, who served and suffered and survived just long enough to understand what had been done to him. He stops. The galaxy continues. The wars continue. The Empire continues, and then falls, and something else rises to take its place. And somewhere, in Imperial records that no one will ever read, there is a designation. CT 7867, decommissioned, status, deserter, final disposition, unknown, not even dead. just unknown. Erased. P. As if he had never existed at all. As if none of them had ever existed. Asaru? Just the rain. Just the sound of being made, over and over, an endless production line of men who were born to die for purposes they did not choose, in service to powers that did not care. That's what happens when a clone questions his orders. He obeys them anyway. And then he vanishes into the silence, another ghost in a galaxy full of ghosts, remembered by no one, mourned by no one, leaving nothing behind but a designation and the fading echo of a question that was never supposed to be asked. Was any of this worth it? The answer is lost in the sound of rain